So this is a Debrie Parvo Model L. The Debrie, you can see here, is Andre Debrie is a French camera manufacturer. The first Debries largely had the same silhouette as this, except for that the body was made out of wood, and that they started making those somewhere around 1908. This was a very popular camera in Europe. They had several different submodels. This particular one, based on the serial number and a couple other things, this one was probably made after 1932, maybe even as late as 1935. But things like the metal ones were what they Man with a Movie Camera was filmed with Parvos, and Lenny Riefenstahl would use Parvos. Apparently Parvo stands for small. And part of what makes it small is the magazines are inside this box. We'll get to that in a minute. First, we're going to walk around the outside of the camera and the various controls. So down here is a manual fade controller for the shutter. It's got a groove that accepts the same crank groove. So if you wanted to, you could stick this in like so, and then just do a fade to black or up from black at whatever speed you wish to do. I'll turn that back to open. Because of the era that these cameras were made, there was a premium on being able to do fades and dissolves and whatnot in camera, just because lab work was not as sophisticated as it is now. So, all right, so that's one of the shutter controls. There are others on other sides we'll get into in a minute. This is sort of, this also controls fade. There's 3 positions that it can rotate through. Right now, I gotta get, yeah, so N is, that N right there, that is normal. There's a reverse and an F. This is all in French. So, but the F is for fade, N you can think of as normal, and the AR is for essentially winding it backwards to get set for fading up from black. On this slot here is most likely a slot for a behind the lens filter. I've never actually seen one in there, but that does go right before the film plane. Most of these cameras, not all of them, but a lot of them, this lens, the side viewing thing usually is the first thing to get broken. So when I bought this camera, it did not have its side eyepiece. So I reverse engineered, figured out what kind of lens to get. So I bought a round lens. You can see as we spin it around, I had to make a 3D print to hold that round lens rather than cut the lens. And the way that works is you flip out this side finder, spin this around, and since it's parallax, you look through one of these 3 holes depending on the distance of your subject. Obviously, the closer the subject is to the camera, the more outboard hole you're going to look at. And if it's far away, you look at the one closest in there. And these are marked both in feet and in meters. And so you sight through there. And the way I've got this, I have a 35 and a 50 millimeter lens. So right now, this is approximating a 35 millimeter lens. To approximate the 50, I have a mask that goes over this that crops it slightly. And then, so now while we're on the back, you got various counters. I'm going to reset this one. Let's see if I can turn it so you can see it a little bit. It's this one is turns of the handle and frames. You get 8 frames per revolution of the crank, which is apparently the same as a Lumiere camera. And then this is total footage in meters. Again, being European, everything is in meters. Down here is frames per second tachometer, which as you crank it, you can see it move. Now, during silent era, 16 frames was the most common preferred frame rate. Because this camera is a little older, it's actually got the mark for 24 frames, which, two things about that. That's hitting 24, that's a lot faster cranking. Also, you can see it's harder to hold it steady. I mean, that's one of the things cranking a camera that supposedly, as a hand crank operator, you would get good at, is being able to keep that needle from bouncing around too much. All right, this thing here is the motor mount. Motor would mount there, and then it tie into the body here. It's geared differently. One full revolution is one frame, not 8 frames as per the hand crank. That's why it's spinning so much faster. I believe in earlier models, before they put motors on as an option, this would have been your single frame way of turning the camera. Now, of course, we have another, in addition to this side eyepiece, we have this back eyepiece, which has a light trap. When you're shooting with film, of course, light can come in through the lens, but it can also come in through the eyepiece. So anytime you're not using the eyepiece, you want that closed, or else light can come in there and ruin the film from the backside. If I were to use this as an eye cup while I was rolling, I would want a better eye cup on here to prevent any kind of light leak coming in through the other way. So with that in mind, there's actually sort of three ways you could frame up your shot on this camera. And the third one is, I would say, the biggest thing that distinguishes a Model L from some of the earlier models. So obviously you got the side finder, which has got some parallax issues. And then you can look through this, which with the film in place, when you look through it, you are looking through the taking lens, and you're using the film essentially as a ground glass, and it's going to be dim and dark, but you can look through the film and use that for framing and focusing. However, that does not work for color films. Color films are remjet backing, and the film is just too dense, you can't see through it. But black and white film, you can. But it is very dark and dim, and of course if you look through while you're cranking, you are seeing the flicker. Interestingly, if you do look through this and have the light, sealed around your eye and you're cranking, the difference between this and, say, like a more modern film camera with a spinning mirror, with a spinning mirror, you're seeing exactly what doesn't go to the film. With this, you actually see what's going on to the film because you're looking through the film as it's being exposed. It is kind of dim and dark and hard to see, which is why they came up with the third thing of viewing, which is they using the existing body style, they're able to engineer space to put an ability to move the gate to one side so that you can focus on a ground glass and then swing the gate back into position before you do a take. So that third way of framing and viewing is only available to you between takes. You can't use it while you're rolling, but it is the most effective for confirming focus and your frame because it's bright and it's not going to have the issues of a parallax finder. So to do that, there are a couple things. There's first, let's talk about this side since we're rotating around. Obviously, here's the crank, and you want to go this direction for forward. You got two buttons here. This button here is a film punch. It's for cutting a little notch in your film. I guess, again, for post, they can feel a little notch and figure out where a take started. This one is for getting the transmission of this lined up properly to move the ground glass into position. And I'll show you that. So that what you do, you push this in, and while you're pushing it in, you turn the handle. Doesn't matter which way, as long as it goes till it locks. So now it locked. Here, if I turn it a little bit and then I push it again, it sort of has to be somewhere in the mechanism in the right position. And up top here is a lever that you swing, you pull up here and swing it over. And that swings the film gate out of the way and the ground glass gate in the way for focusing. And that'll make more sense once we open this up and thread it. All right, we'll close this up. Near as I can tell, this thing here is just a mount for mounting some sort of French flag. At least that's what I've seen in pictures. Right here is another shutter indicator. This is actually indicating what the shutter is doing while you engage a fade in and out. It'll slowly rotate from open to close and from close back to open. And the way that they've designed it, no matter where your shutter is, it's been designed so that 9 cranks will get you from whatever the shutter opening you've picked all the way to fade to black. So you could have a very small shutter opening and fade to black in 9 cranks, or the widest shutter opening available, 9 cranks, it'll still do it. So really smart clockwork going on in there. Which gets me to the one other thing here. This right here is it's the wheel that determines how open your shutter is. So unlike more modern cameras, that the standard shutter is 180 degree shutter, the maximum this shutter can be is 133 millimeters. I mean, not millimeters, 133 degrees. But if you do the math, like 16 frames with 133 degree shutter, it's almost the same as 24 frames at 180 degree shutter. It's actually, what is it? You want to stop down a quarter of a stop. So if you're cranking at 18 frames and have 133 degree shutter, it's exactly the same as 24 frames at 180 degree shutter. So, you know, you can either meter it like it's a normal camera and just not worry about it, and then maybe you're a quarter stop overexposed, which, you know, for film is not a terrible thing. Or if you crank a little faster, it'll be dead on. All right, so then the last thing here is this front. They made a very fast lens changing system. As you can see, there's a groove. This is engaging a pin on the lens. So this is the iris control right here. And these bars, so like here, you can put they've got 4 different sides to these bars. And obviously it looks like they come engraved with whatever lenses you bought with the camera. And so you could mark them like I did here. And so you can mark it with whatever f-stop you want to go to. So like that would be if that's an 8 all the way up there, 5, 6, 4, 2, 8, 2. Some lenses pull the other way for the iris. So whichever lens you have on, you flip this up to whatever position, you know, maybe not here, maybe to the side if you're operating yourself. But that's how you get to the iris. Now for focus, there's another knob. So there's the knob in the front here for the ground glass, but there's another knob here which controls focus. If you see, if I turn it like this, you can see the focus moves the lens in and out. Now if you want to change the lens, it's very simple. Simple thing to do is turn this all the way down or up, doesn't really matter, but just pick something so that you're always doing the same thing. Move the focus all the way to this side. There's a little detent for it, and the lens retracts, and then you take this and you push it the opposite way that it's curved, and just pull the lens out. That's it. And there's a lens port. You just put this back in. These grooves are what engage the focus, and then you stick this in here, lock that, and now you're ready to go. The only thing you got to make sure is when you put it in that wrong lever, that this little pin here lines up with where your iris is, which if you're careless, that might not line up, but lock that in, and then you're there. So it's very fast to change these lenses. Now let's talk about how you load this. First thing is you want to open up the front of the camera, which you just take this lever, swing it like that, and then this whole front swings open. And there's your gate. And you can see these doors will flip open. And this side over here with the crank won't flip open until you remove the handle, crank handle. Don't lose this, of course. That's keys to your car, so to speak. It won't run without that. So on this side, I have no magazine. On this side, I have a magazine. I'm going to take this one out. All right, you can see there's all the mechanical working happens in between where the two magazines are, which is kind of it's amazing they got all that to work in there. Let me put the crank back on just for a moment. You can see all right. So a couple things that are different about this camera than, say, a more modern film camera. The magazines, I'm going to put the crank here. If you look at this magazine, it can work both on this side as a take-up, on this side, right? And then on this side, you just invert it. The film comes out that way. So here I have some film loaded. You can see it prefers to have the emulsion come out the top here. So you got two choices. Originally these were designed so that the film would wind this way and out over a roller here, which would mean that it would be emulsion out. Kodak doesn't ship film emulsion out anymore, even though they do have a code. I believe if you look on the can, it'll say SP718 on pretty much all modern film stock, on one of the smaller things on the left. That means it's wound emulsion in. SP721, I believe, is emulsion out, but again, they don't ship it that way. So you have two choices. You can either hand wind, which is what I did here, which can introduce dirt and dust. Hand wind it from an original roll backwards, emulsion out. Or, and I've done this as well, take a film, wound emulsion in, and then it just has to do a sharp turn around the roller. That's not really ideal, but it does mean I've done it. It does work, and allows you to use film straight from Kodak without having to modify it or touch it or handle it too much. Anyway, so you got it like this. Pull off a little bit that you need. This is the feed side. There's a little lever here, opens up that roller. I'm going to take this. There's a keyway, right? And then this particular magazine is an older one. It only has one keyway. And we'll talk about the magazine, the cores in a minute when I open up the other side. So I'm going to try and line up the keyway as best I can and go around these rollers. It's a little tricky. Because it's such a compact camera, there's not a whole lot of room to get all this done in one go. Let's see. All right. And that has to seat. There's that arrow, so that's got to line up for this to want to go flush. Something's binding. There we go. All right, so now I've got it, goes over that roller, around that one, and there, and then this is you open that up for adjusting. And then you can put the crank on. Crank some film through there. All right, so this, let me see if I can get it to go into the particular position that it likes to be in for the ground. Okay, there we go. You can see, get this film out of the way. So there's the gate, right? Let me open it up for a moment. There's the film gate, which we'll be putting the film through. You'll see also there's 2 pull-down claws and 2 registration pins. But so once you have the film in there, and it's a little hard for me to engage it properly because of that button on the door. Since I don't have that door on, I can't get it into the right position. Maybe I'll do that now. All right, so I'll put the door, shut this door, which allows me to push that button. Put this handle back on. Again, you wouldn't have to do this. This is just, I'm just trying to show you the, all right. There, so that moves the whole gate over to where there's a ground glass that lets you focus. Oh yeah, it won't let me open it, but that's all right. All right, so we'll move this back over this way. Now threading this guy, it's a little tricky. You have to put a curve in it, like so. Line it up, maybe there. Let's see what that looks like. Get it on the perfs. Close it. Should be 2-finger, not too loose. Again, you can double check while you're first learning. It's going to be tight up here, but it shouldn't be so tight that this is going to break. And also you don't want it loose, because if it's too loose, then there's not enough room up in the lid here for the film to move around without getting scratched. Again, really clever that they figured out how to put this whole movement in to an already existing body. It did make the camera more front heavy with having all this mechanism that wasn't in prior models, but they didn't change the size of the camera, which is remarkable. So we'll put this back this way, and then we'll turn this way. Now that I found, as tricky as the feed side was, the take-up side can be even harder to figure out how to do. And I'll show you what at least is my current theory of doing it. All right, so here we have a magazine. It's got little metal clasps, 3 of them, and you just have to push them in the right position so that the latches will release. You pull it apart. So in addition to preferring emulsion out, they have these strange cores. So these cores they're the same outer diameter as a modern film core. However, their inner diameter is different, and they're integral to the magazine. You can imagine you put this magazine together, there's a hole in there. I can touch the hole, that's not light tight. So this core acts as a light baffle as well as what the film is being held in. So there you got this flange here. This goes over top of it. You can see in there, and there's grooves, and that acts as a light baffle. So, and then this one's a little more modern, has multiple keyways. So what I've done, what I've found is the easiest is get this started. We'll get so you got to put another twist in the bottom, and it's got this similar mechanism. You've got the same lever to move that upper roller. So I'm gonna, all right, that should be about right, hopefully. We'll revisit that, see if that's big enough loop. But I've gone under this roller on the sprocket, and then on the bottom of that roller. And then I'm just going to take just the magazine without the core and without the lid. And there's no sprockets or anything, it's just a felt light trap here. Shove it through there. And you can see there is like a brass roller here. Feed that through. And I'm just going to take this, because there's no, the keyway is on the core, not in the magazine. It's super easy to get this magazine on. You just got to make sure that the you're lined up so that later the lid's going to go. There's a little, I don't know if you can see it right in here. There's a little, see those two pins, and there's a little piece of the magazine that's going to want to sit inside there. So you make sure that's right. Get that seated. And then take your core again. Now you want to find the keyway to the core. That's easy enough. Slide that on. And then there is a little slot here that will receive this. Now, I've made some 3D printed versions of these cores, so I could send them accidentally to the lab and it not be the end of the world. They're almost as good as the original, but more importantly, they're a little more expendable. So, all right, so we roll it like that. You can see, just wind that up. It's going to be emulsion out. Everything seems fine, so I'm going to put this lid on. Put it in, and then again, it's designed so you can get to these 3 latches even with it inside the magazine. Now to close this, there are these levers on the side here that are the hinge. You need to lift up the whole top, squeeze these in, and then drop this down. Now, you're going to see I've made a mistake, because now I can't, that's not going to go. So what you have to do, make sure both sides are closed, and you can see I got the handle on here, so it's not going to go completely loose, but it's a little loose, so you have to pinch these while working that little hinge thing on the top. Anyway, you close this down, and then in the top of this, there's cavities in the front of this that leave enough room for the film, and then you lock this like so, and now we've got film in there. And that's basically it for loading it. Of course, you could reset the counter. There you go. And then if someone said, okay, we need you to shoot with this right away, the acronym FAST, which to help you remember to set everything, is focus, aperture, shutter, and then T for tachometer. So focus, again, you move this lever up here. Either you use the witness marks on that metal bar up top, or you focus directly through the optical system, either swinging the ground glass out of the way, or if you choose not to, just through the film. So you got two and a half ways of adjusting focus, either by witness marks or by actually focusing. So that's focus. Aperture is this guy, right? And so you adjust that according to either the witness marks you got here, or if you really want to, you can look inside. It's marked on the lens. And so then speed, shutter. So in this case, in most cases, you want the most shutter you want. So that's 7, which is 133 degrees. And make sure that this is also in the full up position. And then also just make sure that this guy is pointing to open. And then tachometer, that's pretty straightforward. You literally do have a tachometer, and you just have to remember to crank forward and crank in the direction you plan to, it's clockwise. Now, the only other thing you need to make sure for the tachometer is this. So this is the, the fade controller. You want to have it in N. If you're in N, it's going to behave normally. If for some reason you wanted to execute a fade, you would push this up while you're rolling, or I'm going to push this up, hold it for 2 cranks, then you'll feel it engage, at which point you can let go, and then over 9 further cranks, it will slowly fade to black. Now, in some models, after those 9 cranks, the transmission would lock up and stop. That does not seem to be the case for all of them. And because this is a later model, I feel like maybe they found that that was a problem, that that caused too much stress on the transmission. So in this model, it just keeps going. So I'm going to show you. So we go like this, hold it up there, and then I'm going to stop. You can see that's dropping back into place. But more importantly, now that I've engaged it, you can see this is slowly turning to closed. So now it's closed. Now, on some versions, as soon as it hit closed, this would stop turning. But I feel like with you cranking and then suddenly hitting that hard, it would be a really tough on the transmission. But it does make a big clunk, so you can just stop when you hear the clunk. And then go back to here if you wanted to do a crossfade. And then you could engage it to there. And we'll go backwards. I think, let's see, I've forgotten now whether I'd have to look in the manual whether you'd go backwards in the reverse here, or whether you do the reverse. I think you do the reverse after you're wound yourself back to the beginning. So in that case, we're still closed, and since it's 9 frames, I'm going to go backwards. So it's 14, so that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm doing the math wrong. 6 and 4. Got one more. There you go. So somewhere around there, it's still closed, as you can see on this side. And then you would engage this again for the fade up. You got to do it while you're rolling. And then as you crank, it's opening you back up again. And then it clicks. So having done that, what we just did was a cross dissolve. Obviously, I wasn't pointed at anything and spinning the camera around, but that would allow you to fade down and cross dissolve and fade back up. You also, if you didn't want to use that mechanism, you could make a fade as long as you wanted by turning this as fast or as slow as you wished while you cranked. So anyway, I really like this camera just because it's super compact, and oh yeah, the other thing I forgot to mention, so this viewing system, unlike earlier viewing systems on some of the earlier hand crank cameras, it's rectified, meaning up and down is up and down, left is left, and right is right. So you can actually look through this and frame it properly, not like you're framing like a large format still camera. You can actually see the image as same orientation as it would be for the parallax finder.